Standing at my grandmother's graveside, my father leaned over and whispered, with an actual smirk on his face, that she'd never really loved me, that I'd get nothing from her estate, and I should stop pretending otherwise. 6 weeks later, my father was the one packing boxes into a rented storage unit because my grandmother's real will had already told a very different story than the one he'd been counting on. If you've ever been cruel to at a moment you least expected, hit subscribe because this story is going to feel like justice in slow motion. Comment below and tell me the worst thing anyone's ever said to you at a funeral of all places. I read everyone. Here's how it actually played out. My name is Isabel Grant. I'm 30, and my grandmother Eleanor raised me for most of my childhood. After my parents' divorce left my father, Gerald, largely absent, and my mother working double shifts just to keep us housed. Eleanor wasn't just my grandmother. She was functionally the most stable parental presence I had for most of my life, the one who showed up to every school event my own parents missed, who taught me to cook, to manage money, to recognize my own worth even when nobody else around me seemed particularly invested in reinforcing it. Gerald's relationship with Eleanor, his own mother, had grown steadily more transactional over the years I watched it unfold. He visited when he needed something, financial help most often, always framed as temporary, always somehow becoming permanent. In the final 2 years of Eleanor's life, after a series of health scares left her needing regular assistance, Gerald suddenly became remarkably present, moving into her guest room to help out, a level of attentiveness that struck me, even then, as suspiciously well-timed, given his decades of prior absence. I noticed things during those final 2 years that troubled me quietly, things I mentioned to Eleanor directly on more than one occasion. Gerald had begun managing her finances to make things easier for her, had gradually discouraged visits from her longtime friends, citing her need for rest, had at least 2 occasions I witnessed personally, pressured her into signing documents she seemed uncertain about, framed as routine paperwork. Eleanor, in her more lucid moments, expressed a specific worry to me once, about 6 months before she passed, that troubled me deeply at the time. "Your father's been asking about the house a great deal lately," she told me, sitting in her kitchen, her voice quieter and more careful than usual. "I don't think he's asking out of concern for me." Eleanor passed peacefully in her sleep 4 months later. At the graveside service, standing beside me as the casket was lowered, Gerald leaned close, his voice pitched low enough that only I could hear it, and said the words I'll never fully forget. "You know she never really loved you the way you think she did, Isabel. She loved having someone to raise since I wasn't around enough. That's not the same thing." He smiled slightly, a small, satisfied smirk I recognized from a lifetime of watching him say cruel things, designed to look from a distance like nothing at all. "The house and everything else comes to me. I'd start adjusting your expectations now if I were you." I didn't respond at the graveside. I'd learned, over 30 years, that Gerald's cruelty rarely improved with confrontation in the moment. I simply nodded, let the service continue, and drove home that evening carrying a specific, cold certainty that something about his confidence felt wrong in a way I couldn't yet articulate. The will reading was scheduled for the following week, and Gerald arrived visibly relaxed, already discussing, within earshot of the family, plans to sell the house and consolidate what he clearly expected to be a substantial inheritance. Eleanor's estate attorney, a careful, meticulous woman named Patricia Sung, who had represented Eleanor for over 15 years, opened the reading with something that immediately shifted the room's energy. Before I read the primary document, I need to note for the record that Mrs. Grant executed an updated will 11 months ago, privately, in this office, without her son's knowledge, revoking a previous version he may be more familiar with. Gerald's expression, I watched carefully, moved from confusion to something closer to alarm. Patricia explained that Eleanor had come to her office alone on a day Gerald believed she was simply attending a routine doctor's appointment, expressing specific concerns about undue influence over her financial decisions and a desire to protect the majority of her estate, including the house, from what she described in her own handwritten notes attached to the file as well-intentioned pressure that no longer feels like it's coming from love. The updated will left the house and the bulk of Eleanor's estate directly to me, in trust, along with a detailed letter explaining her reasoning, one Patricia read aloud at Eleanor's specific written instruction. In it, Eleanor described watching Gerald's renewed attentiveness during her final years with growing unease, noting specific instances where she'd felt pressured into financial decisions she didn't fully understand or agree with, and stating plainly that she wanted her actual wishes protected before her memory or judgment could be questioned or manipulated further. She left Gerald a modest fixed sum, explicitly described in the letter as enough to start over responsibly, but not enough to lean on me for the better part of 20 years. What none of us in that room knew yet, including Gerald himself, was how precarious his own financial situation had actually become. He'd taken out 2 significant loans against his own condo over the preceding year, using projected inheritance as collateral justification with a private lender who'd grown increasingly aggressive about repayment as Eleanor's health declined and the timeline to his expected windfall shortened. With the house and estate now legally, irrevocably directed to me, instead, Gerald's projected inheritance evaporated entirely, leaving him unable to service loans he'd taken specifically against money that, as it turned out, had never actually been his to count on. Gerald's condo went into foreclosure 5 weeks after the will reading. I found out, not from him directly, but from my aunt, who mentioned it almost in passing at a family gathering, describing Gerald moving his remaining belongings into a rented storage unit as he figured out his next steps. I felt in that moment a complicated mixture of things, a flicker of something close to vindication, immediately followed by something heavier and sadder, watching a man who spent his final 2 years performing devotion to his dying mother lose everything the moment that performance stopped generating a return. I didn't reach out immediately. I needed time to sit with the full weight of what I'd learned about Eleanor's final months, about how much quiet manipulation she apparently absorbed before finally, privately, protecting herself and me both. When Gerald did eventually call months later, it wasn't an apology exactly. It was closer to an accounting. He said, "I convinced myself I was owed something for finally showing up. I think some part of me knew the whole time that showing up because you're owed something isn't actually showing up at all." I didn't restore him financially, not directly, though I did help him find a small apartment through a connection of mine, and I've maintained a careful, distant relationship with him since. One builds more on obligation than warmth, but real nonetheless. I kept Eleanor's house exactly as she intended, and I've spent the past year slowly filling it with the kind of life she always hoped I'd build, the life she quietly protected on my behalf before she was gone to see it happen. I think about that graveside moment often, my father's smirk, the casual cruelty of a man so certain of his own inheritance that he felt safe saying something so unkind at his own mother's burial. He was right about one thing in the end: she did love having someone to raise. What he never understood was that loving someone and protecting them quietly until the end were never actually different things to her at all. Has someone ever underestimated how clearly the people who love us can see exactly what's happening, even when they can't say it out loud yet? Tell me about it in the comments. I read every one. And if this story resonated, share it with someone who's been quietly protected by someone who loved them more carefully than anyone realized. This is Isabel, and this has been Revenge of Betrayal. Remember, the truth doesn't need you to raise your voice. Sometimes it just needs one visit to the right office on the right day.